The thing about money, real money, the kind you build one spreadsheet cell at a time, is it never screams. It doesn't crash through doors or spill lipstick on collars. It just whispers constantly. And I listen. Always have. So when I sat across from Eliza that Friday night, sipping the same budget Tempranillo we've shared since 2009, nodding along to her story about another client dinner up in Denver, I already knew. Not guessed. Knew. She was lying, yes. But more than that, she was spending. And that's the real tell with Eliza. God bless her expensive soul. She spends like she's trying to outrun silence. Didn't even finish the risotto, she laughed, brushing off her sleeve, as if I didn't notice the $1,742.16 that left our secondary account 2 hours earlier at the Little Nell in Aspen. An elite ski hotel that looks down on people like me even when I'm wearing a tie. I nodded again, smiled, even offered to do the dishes. Because this isn't the part where I explode. No, that's what amateurs do. I don't throw things. I log in, and I watch the numbers line up like soldiers, charges for spa treatments, room upgrades, view click what. All of it traced back to the savings account she's not supposed to know I monitor. She thinks she's clever. Thinks I'm some soft, boring man who only gets excited about retirement contributions and vacuum lines on carpet. And for years, I played along, because I believed in the myth of stability that if you work hard, budget smart, and don't stray, the universe will keep your wife from screwing your coworker in a chalet while you're reviewing 401k, as for teachers. But the universe doesn't give a damn. And neither does Tom Renner, senior partner at my firm, owner of a Range Rover with massage seats, and apparently, amateur skier with a taste for married women. I found the confirmation email forwarded to her private inbox by mistake, still logged in on our shared tablet. Can't wait to see you in room 608. Bring that blue thing I like. No signature, just initials, TR. And suddenly, I laughed. Loud, hard, near maniacal. Because of course it's him. The man who once told me to aim a little higher in life while brushing croissant flakes off his lapel. I stared at that message and knew this wasn't infidelity, it was a hostile merger. And I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was fascinated. This is how empires fall. Quietly. With perfectly groomed beards and overpriced bathrobes. What Eliza didn't know is that I moved half our liquid assets out of joint control 6 months ago, after noticing her sudden love for girls' weekends. That always seemed to coincide with boutique conference receipts and facial charges from cities she never mentioned. I let it pile up. Let her believe she had the upper hand. Because I wanted her to feel secure, truly, deeply secure, in her ability to deceive me. There's a kind of power in that. I even asked if she needed help packing for Aspen, feigning a husband's dull curiosity. Oh, nothing special, she said. Just work shoes and a smile. It was almost poetic. But here's the part that still makes my jaw clench in the dark. She's planning to ask me to sell the house. Our house. The one we spent 7 years saving for, picking tile samples together like idiots, arguing over drawer pulls as if any of it mattered. I overheard her whispering about it on the phone to him. It'll look like we're downsizing, she said. He's too cautious to say no. And just like that, I became a pawn in my own life. But pawns can promote, can't they? Especially the quiet ones who sit on the board just long enough to reach the other side. So I smiled that night as she kissed my cheek, reeking of hotel soap and triumph. I smiled and poured another glass. Because the storm wasn't coming. It was already here. And unlike Eliza, I brought an umbrella and a goddamn exit strategy. We weren't perfect, but who was after 15 years and a mortgage? There was a rhythm to it, a domestic choreography we learned without ever really discussing it. She handled the social side. I managed the numbers, and in between we pretended that counted as love. Our mornings were quiet but coordinated. I brewed coffee, she read her emails, and we sat in silence like an old married couple in a Norman Rockwell painting, only with better insulation and worse communication. We had our routines, Sunday pancakes, Tuesday trash night, and monthly wine tastings that gave her an excuse to dress up and me a reason to feel slightly overdressed in my own damn life. I thought we were solid. Maybe not exciting, but stable, like a low-risk mutual fund with decent long-term potential. And maybe that was the problem. I built our world around predictability, and she always needed more movement than I realized. In retrospect, the signs were obvious. The way her phone always landed face down on the table, how she'd stopped typing the second I walked in the room. She started locking the bathroom door like we were college roommates instead of spouses. But I chalked it up to boundaries, to privacy, to her needing space, The way magazines say women do when they're reclaiming their independence or whatever the phrase was that month. I didn't question the shopping sprees, the sudden interest in yoga retreats, the hours she'd spend volunteering for event planning gigs that never had actual events. I told myself it was fine because our bills were paid, our lawn was trimmed, and we still said, "Love you," before bed, even if it had started sounding more like punctuation than meaning. There were nights I'd reach for her and she'd flinch, like I was a cold breeze in a warm room. But I'd laugh it off, make a joke, tell myself we were just tired. Everyone's tired, right? Especially after a decade of compromise and Costco runs. We even had a shared calendar color-coded, no less, where I'd schedule our monthly budget meetings and she'd drop in spa day with a little heart emoji like it meant something. It did, just not what I thought. Looking back, the real giveaway wasn't her behavior, it was mine. The subtle shift from confidence to compliance, the way I started editing myself, asking fewer questions, afraid of making her distant. That's the cruelest part of betrayal. It trains you in advance. You become fluent in ignoring instinct and letting gut feelings die quiet deaths. I remember one night in January, she came home smelling like snow and someone else's cologne, cheeks flushed from window shopping. I asked if she had fun. She said yes, then hugged me a beat too fast and disappeared upstairs. I sat at the table another hour, staring at our bank account on my laptop like it might blink first. It didn't. I convinced myself that doubt was weakness, that suspicion was corrosive, that trust meant looking the other way. But trust, I've learned, is only as strong as the silence it sits in, and ours was deafening. Sometimes I'd watch her laugh with friends, phone in hand, eyes dancing, and wonder when she stopped laughing like that around me. I'd blame myself. Maybe I worked too much. Maybe I stopped being interesting. But then I'd remember the dinners I planned, the anniversaries I never missed, the way I remembered how she takes her coffee even when she changes it up just to test me. I did everything right, by the manual, by the damn blueprint of modern marriage. And still, here we are. I built her a life so comfortable she mistook it for a cage, and now she wants out. Fine. But what she doesn't know is that the locks on this cage are mine. And she's already thrown away her key. It was a Wednesday, gray and uneventful, the kind of day that slips between the cracks of memory, except this one didn't, because this was the day I heard her lie with such effortless poise, it turned something inside me to glass. I was working from home, half buried in a spreadsheet, when her phone rang on the kitchen counter. She was upstairs, shower running, and for a moment I thought about ignoring it. But the name flashing across the screen, Lila Yoga, caught my attention. Lila hasn't been to yoga in over a year. I know because we ran into her last fall at the hardware store and she joked that she only stretches when her dog does. Still, I let it go, let the phone ring until it stopped, but then it lit up again, same name, and before I could think better of it, I answered. Silence at first, then a voice, male, smooth, low-pitched, Eliza? Hey, I got the lift passes, and I booked dinner for 7. Same place as last time. Can't wait to see you. And then click. He hung up, like a man used to making efficient calls to someone else's wife. I stood there, the silence suddenly pressing in on my temples, phone still warm in my hand, wondering what the hell I just heard. Dinner for 2? Lift passes? And same place as last time? I was still processing when Eliza came downstairs, damp hair wrapped in a towel, wearing the same oversized t-shirt she always did after a shower, except this time, it looked like camouflage. She smiled, God, she smiled, and kissed me lightly on the mouth, then picked up her phone, thumbed the screen, and froze for half a second. Just one. That's all it took. A flicker in her eyes, like a system glitch, before she slipped it into her back pocket and said, Lila's just checking in about a girl's weekend in Vail. That was it. Smooth. Practiced. Preloaded. She poured herself coffee and sat down like we were still in the same marriage, like I hadn't just been handed a neon-bright glimpse of something vile underneath our neatly folded life. I nodded. Said nothing. Because saying something now would be premature, would shift the power too early, and I needed more than a hunch and a ski reference to dismantle 15 years. But I watched her sip that coffee with steady hands and a voice that never trembled, and I realized something unspoken had already snapped. The trust, not broken. No, that would be too easy, had mutated. Gone from implicit to conditional, from belief to investigation. Every word she said now had weight, every glance, every smile a puzzle piece that no longer fit. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to her and listened to the soft rhythm of her breathing, wondering how long she'd been perfecting the role of wife while rehearsing her exit lines with someone else. I thought of the phone call, The tone of it, casual, intimate, like they'd done this before. Same place as last time. How many last times have there been? And did she laugh with him the way she used to laugh with me? The worst part wasn't the call. It was how calm I felt afterward. No rage, no explosion. Just clarity, and underneath it, a slow rising resolve like smoke from a fire that hadn't reached the walls yet. That was the moment everything changed. Not when she cheated, she may have already done that, but when I stopped defending the version of her I wanted to believe in. When I let the truth stretch its legs, even if it wasn't fully dressed yet. And now, I was watching her. Not like a husband watches a wife, but like an auditor watches an account that suddenly doesn't add up. The moment I started treating it like a case instead of a marriage, everything became easier. Emotions are expensive, unreliable, loud, and prone to overreaction, so I shelved them, like old sweaters in summer. What I needed now was data. And Eliza, to her credit, made it easy. She was already so confident in her deception that she'd stopped bothering to cover her tracks. A predictable liar is a gift. First, I synced our calendar to my work phone, a quiet change she wouldn't notice, and started cross-referencing her girls' nights and client dinners with our bank statements, which I still had full access to, even if she'd forgotten. Patterns emerged. Boutique hotel charges during midweek work events. Lyft rides that started 3 miles from where she said she'd be. One charge, an $18 cocktail at a jazz bar downtown, stood out because it happened at 1:14 a.m. on a Tuesday. Eliza hates jazz. Hates it like some people hate cilantro, viscerally, irrationally. That's when I started keeping a private file, encrypted and stored under the innocuous name Q3_projections. It filled faster than I expected. But passive observation only goes so far, so I got creative. One night, she said she was meeting a friend from her old marketing firm. I nodded, smiled, even asked if she wanted me to drop her off. It was raining, but she declined, too fast. I'll Uber. It's easier. So I followed the Uber. Didn't tail it like a movie, no dramatics. I just used the GPS from the shared account we once set up for safety back when we still believed in things like trust. She was supposed to be at Reva's, a wine bar near the museum. Instead, she landed at a restaurant attached to a boutique hotel 2 cities over. I parked far enough to avoid suspicion and waited. 90 minutes later, she exited, laughing, touching the arm of a man I didn't recognize but knew instantly. Tall, expensive coat, that unmistakable entitlement of someone who thinks the world should thank him for existing. And she looked light, like I hadn't seen her in years. Not happy, just weightless. Like her skin didn't remember the feel of me anymore. That should have hurt. It didn't. It crystallized something. I snapped a photo, not for proof, not for confrontation, but as a receipt. Emotional bookkeeping. That same week, I started talking more at work. Not about her. About Tom Renner. Hey, I asked Greg from payroll, what's Tom been up to? He ever make it up to Aspen like he planned? Just small talk, harmless. But Greg raised an eyebrow and said, oh yeah, with that chick from marketing. What's her name? Lisa? Laura? The one with the hair. I smiled. Said nothing. Because there it was. Confirmation from a third party without even asking the question. Later, I checked my old work emails, the ones routed through our joint account when she helped me set up couple-friendly cloud syncing. She'd forgotten about those. Buried deep was a thread from months ago. Tom, here's that restaurant you loved last time. Should I book again for February? Sent from her personal Gmail. I forwarded it to myself, then deleted the trace. I started building timelines, visits, transfers, messages, until the narrative unfolded like a bank statement of infidelity. No direct confession, no photos of bodies tangled in bedsheets, but enough to know I wasn't crazy, and more than enough to begin crafting a plan. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to watch her dig deeper into her lie, wait until she believed she'd won, and then, when she was so far gone she couldn't see daylight, I'd close the door behind her quietly, permanently. She thought she was the magician. But I'd become the audience member who'd already figured out the trick, sitting back in my seat, waiting for the curtain to fall. It came in the form of a receipt. Not a love letter, not a confession, not some sloppy text left open on her phone. No, Eliza was far too practiced for that. It was a paper receipt, of all things, left folded in her coat pocket, the same cream-wool coat she insisted on dry cleaning weekly, even when it hadn't been worn. I found it while looking for her keys one morning, her request, of course, because she was running late for Pilates. I slid my hand into the pocket, felt the crinkle, and pulled it out with the same care you'd use when defusing a small bomb. It was from the St. Clair Hotel, Aspen, dated last Saturday. 2 guests. Dinner, wine, a suite with a fireplace. And at the bottom, her signature. Eliza Liddell. No alias, no attempt to mask it. And the pinstroke, steady, practiced, unashamed. Like she'd signed it 1,000 times before. I held that slip of paper in my hand for what felt like a year. It was physical, undeniable, tactile treachery. I could feel the weight of it. My name wasn't on it. Nothing in our life was in it. Just her and him, and a night I had spent alone watching a documentary about cave paintings while she told me she was recharging with friends. I stood there in the hallway, the morning light slicing through the blinds like judgment, and something in me stopped moving. Not broke, just stopped. Like a machine hitting the end of its programmed loop. And in that stillness, in that perfect, almost sacred silence, I didn't feel rage. I didn't scream or crumble or tear the receipt into poetic little shreds. I slid it back into the coat pocket and zipped it shut. Because the truth wasn't for her anymore, it was mine. Mine to hold, mine to use. Proof, yes, but more than that, permission. I made his coffee like always. Set her travel mug next to her keys. Watched her fly down the stairs in her leggings and forced smile. Kissed her cheek when she leaned in, and felt nothing. Not resentment, not pain, just space. The kind of vast, clean space that follows an explosion. She grabbed her mug, thanked me absently, and said she'd be late tonight, another class, some new trainer. I nodded, watched the door close behind her, and stood in the quiet afterward as if listening to the echoes of a ghost that hadn't yet realized it was dead. That night, I poured myself a drink, logged into the secure drive I'd been building, and uploaded a photo of the receipt. Labeled the folder Phase 1. The break had already happened. This was just the administrative step. Eliza didn't know it yet. She was still operating under the illusion that lies, when repeated enough, become infrastructure, but I'd already moved my mind out of the marriage. What remained now was strategy. Execution. Not revenge in the petty sense, not some impulsive act of fury. No, this would be clean, silent, precise. She would never hear the shot that ended this, because I wouldn't raise a voice, wouldn't issue a threat. I'd simply disappear from her world, financially, emotionally, structurally, until the day she looked up and realized she was living in a house made of unpaid debts and evaporated trust, with no one left to balance the books. I sipped my drink and stared at the flicker of the television, volume muted, letting the room fill with a calm that wasn't peace, but purpose. The kind of clarity that comes when you stop asking why and start deciding how. She came to me on a Sunday morning, wrapped in a robe she never used unless she wanted something, hair damp, eyes just glassy enough to suggest premeditated emotion. "Can we talk?" she asked, voice soft, throat tight, like she'd just swallowed her own guilt but wasn't ready to admit it. I looked up from my book, something dense and historical, chosen specifically to remind her I hadn't been sitting idle, and nodded once, marking my place with a slow, deliberate crease. She sat across from me like a student preparing to plead for a late grade, folding one leg under the other, arms crossed in a way that hugged herself more than the room. "I've just been overwhelmed lately," she began, casting her gaze down like there was a script written on the floor. "Work has been brutal, and I feel like I'm spinning in 20 directions, and I know I haven't been present, not like I should be, and I hate how distant we've become." Her eyes flicked up at that last line, scanning for a crack in my expression. I gave her none. She kept going. "I've been thinking about us a lot, Marcus. About how we used to be. I miss that. I miss you." And then came the shift, the emotional sleight of hand. She leaned forward, reached out, let her fingers graze mine. "I know I've made mistakes. I just don't want to lose what we have. We've built so much together." There it was, the appeal to history, to sunk cost. She smelled faintly of the vanilla lotion she only wore when we were dating, and I realized she was trying to conjure a version of herself I hadn't seen in years, the charming, warm Eliza who used to hum while folding laundry, who used to touch my arm in crowded rooms just to make sure I was still close. But that woman was gone, and this one, this careful manipulator in a robe she'd likely worn in a hotel suite with someone else, was performing resurrection with wet eyes and hollow lines. "I've been thinking we should take a trip," she said, voice brightening as if hope were a color she could just repaint the room with. "Somewhere quiet. Just us. Maybe the coast. Reset." I nodded slowly, felt the pressure of her hand still resting on mine, and offered the softest, most non-committal smile I could shape without effort. "That sounds nice," I said. She exhaled like someone who'd just disarmed a bomb, leaned in, kissed my cheek with trembling lips, and whispered, I love you. And that's when I saw it, the crack. The hesitation, not in my response, but in her delivery. Like she was testing the weight of the words midair. Like she didn't believe them herself. I let the silence stretch, not cold, not warm, just absolute. And she retreated, slowly, confused by the calm she couldn't penetrate. Because what Eliza didn't know is that I was already packing her future into quiet exits and quiet accounts. Every lie she told now was just paperwork. Every tear, a signature. She hadn't come to repair us. She'd come to manage me, to soften the terrain she sensed was about to shift. But I wasn't hers to manage anymore. I was already gone. She just hadn't been notified. It began with the password to the joint brokerage account, the one she assumed I'd forgotten when we simplified things last spring. She called it decluttering. I called it disarming. But I kept a copy of every statement, every login, and more importantly, I kept my memory sharp. She thought I didn't notice when she started shifting our automatic deposits to the secondary savings account, the one under her name but still partially fed by my monthly salary. She assumed I wouldn't question why the escrow surplus from the house refinance never showed up in the joint ledger. Because Eliza, despite her flair for deception, never understood infrastructure. She knew how to spend, not how systems worked. So I spent the better part of 3 weekends slowly draining anything I had access to, legally, quietly, into separate holdings she couldn't touch. I filed for an LLC in a neighboring state under a generic consultancy name, rerouted my paycheck there, and paid myself a modest wage through a new personal account she didn't know existed. I told her business was slow. She believed it. I canceled unnecessary subscriptions, rerouted credit card points to digital gift cards, sold off a little crypto I kept from years back and converted it to prepaid Visa cards I stored in my office, labeled printer toner. Every step small and visible. That's the trick. Revenge doesn't need to roar. It needs to endure. Next, I began planting seeds with our mutual friends. Casual lines at dinner. Eliza's been so independent lately. I barely know what she's up to half the time. Or during coffee. We've been reassessing priorities. She's talking about moving on from the house. I played the concerned but confused husband, the man trying to hold together a marriage slowly unraveling from forces outside his grasp. I never accused. I just suggested. People remember suggestion longer than confrontation. Then came the financial tether, the house. It was the crown jewel of her identity, the Pinterest perfect living room, the herb garden she never tended but always photographed, the walk-in closet she called her sanctuary. She loved the house. But what she didn't know was that I'd already spoken to the mortgage advisor and asked what would happen if I refinanced the property under a trust and then pulled out early. Turns out, with her limited personal income and growing debt, credit cards she thought were business expenses, all traceable, I could initiate a buyout proposal she couldn't afford to match. I didn't need to take the house. I just needed to make it clear it was now a burden she couldn't keep. And the best part? I left one small account untouched. One card. One checking account still in both our names. I left it clean, healthy. She'll use it. She'll put her next ski weekend or self-care escape on it. And when she does, I'll have the paper trail I need to mark her as financially reckless in any future dispute over property division, should it ever come to that. I didn't need lawyers. I needed leverage. I needed her to feel safe right up until the moment she stepped off the cliff I built for her, stone by stone, with receipts and smiles. The plan wasn't fast. It wasn't flashy, but it was airtight. And by the time Eliza realized the safety net was gone, I'd be living 3 cities away with a new zip code and a financial footprint she couldn't trace. She would be left with debt, declining credit, a house she couldn't afford, and friends whispering over brunch about how distant she seemed before the split. Not because I would tell them, but because I'd made it easy for them to draw their own conclusions. She would learn what it felt like to be slowly, systematically removed from comfort. Not punished. Rewritten. She thought betrayal was a private act. She was wrong. It's a chain reaction. And I was about to pull the first pin. It started with a declined card at her favorite boutique. Innocuous, forgettable, but telling. She brushed it off as a glitch, used another, and kept shopping. But the next week, the real cracks began to show. I timed it precisely. Her auto payments stopped processing, her credit utilization hit 80%, and a fraud alert froze one of the joint accounts she'd been siphoning from. The one I'd left open like bait. I'd reported unusual activity, and the bank, in their infinite algorithmic wisdom, locked it down without question. She called me from the car, flustered, but trying to sound breezy. Hey babe, weird thing, our card's frozen. Did you forget to pay the bill? I told her I'd look into it. Then I didn't. That weekend, I initiated the trust transfer paperwork on the house. Quiet, simple, but loaded. She was home when the notary came, played the role of confused but polite spouse while I signed documents that would turn her dream home into a leverage tool. Just updating some estate stuff, I said. All standard. She smiled, nodded, but I saw the twitch in her jaw. She'd sensed something off, but couldn't name it. And that was the point. Then came the withdrawal. Our friends, one by one, started to fade. I'd fed them a slow diet of half-truths, that she'd been distant, distracted, secretive. Never accusations. Just tone, concern, empathy. I think she's going through something, I'd say, and let them fill in the rest. It worked. Dinner invites stopped. Brunches didn't include her. She asked me once, "Did you notice people are weird lately?" I shrugged. Everyone's busy, I guess. Her voice cracked when she said, "I feel like I'm being frozen out." I didn't answer. Just kissed her on the forehead and went back to my laptop. The real blow came 2 weeks later, when her gym membership, one of those luxe boutique spots, was flagged for non-payment. She stormed into the kitchen, eyes blazing, demanding answers. I told her the accounts had been compromised, that we were being audited, that I was working on it. All half true. All enough to keep her spinning. I started coming home later, quiet but present. She asked if I was seeing someone. I said no. She asked if I was angry. I said not at all. That silence, measured, calm, was the most violent thing I could have done. Because she needed chaos to distract, to redirect, and I gave her none. Only the sound of inevitability creeping in. I watched her pore over our bank statements, trying to untangle the threads she used to pull so easily. But they led nowhere now, only to prepaid cards, business accounts she couldn't access, and a husband who no longer asked where she was going. Her face changed. Less confident. Her eyes darted more. She wore makeup indoors again, as if appearance could still buy control. I watched, and I waited, and I let her realize in slow, sickening increments that her fall wasn't coming, it had already started. And there was no bottom in sight. You know, Eliza, I used to think betrayal was some grand, cinematic thing. Explosions, tears, slammed doors. But your brand of betrayal, it was quiet. Surgical. You didn't kill this marriage in a fit of rage. You bled it out over time. Smiling while you did it. And I watched you. I watched you fake warmth with a man who spends more on wristwatches than you've earned in a year. I watched you sign receipts with my last name while booking hotel suites he probably didn't even pay for. And I said nothing. Because I wanted to see how far you'd go. How many times you could lie to my face before you forgot I was the man who built this entire life. You thought I was asleep. Dull. Distracted. But I was documenting. Every lie. Every night out. Every little transaction you thought would slip beneath the radar. You were predictable, Eliza, painfully so. You traded legacy for flattery. Security for whatever attention felt like affection at the time. And you thought I'd never find out. You thought the silence meant weakness. But it wasn't weakness. It was preparation. You've been living in a house you no longer own, funded by a man who stopped paying for you months ago. The credit cards you've been swiping shut down. The friends you've leaned on are gone. I didn't have to say a word. I just let your choices echo louder than mine. And now, here you are, asking what happened, crying in a kitchen I paid for, wondering how the ground gave out beneath you. I'll tell you how. I gave it to you. Piece by piece. You didn't notice, because you were too busy rehearsing your next alibi. You thought love was a favor I owed you. But it was a contract. And you broke it. So here's what happens next. You'll stay in this house for now. Not because you own it, but because I've allowed you to. That ends in 6 weeks. You'll receive a notice, clean, legal, emotionless. You'll read it alone. You'll try to call me. I won't answer. Because this, right now, is the last conversation we'll ever have that means anything. You lost me a long time ago, Eliza. The only difference is now you finally know it. She still lives in the house for now. I see the blinds shift sometimes when I drive past, not often, but enough to know she's in there. Smaller than before, like the walls have begun closing in. The garden's gone to hell. She never had the stomach for maintenance. And the neighbors stopped waving months ago. Funny how silence can spread like mold. They won't say it to her face, but they know. Or they suspect, which is worse, because it leaves room for imagination, and imagination is rarely kind. I hear she tried reconnecting with a few old friends. Brunches, texts, a tearful message to Michelle about how something's changed between them. Michelle showed it to me. Of course she did. She's known since December. That's the thing about burning bridges. You forget how brightly they glow behind you. As for Tom, gone. No announcement, no drama. Just gone. Word around the office is he's moving to Seattle. Found someone younger, fitter, less expensive. I could have warned her. But warnings were a luxury I no longer extend. My part's done. The accounts are clean. The trust is sealed. The car, the condo, the company, mine. Everything else, ashes. I haven't spoken to her since the day I laid it all out. She sent one message, a hollow apology wrapped in self-pity, but I left it unread. Closure doesn't require acknowledgement. It requires finality. I sleep differently now. Not better, just differently. No more second-guessing. No more pretending. I wake up knowing the man I became in that silence was not the one she married, but he's the one who survived her. People ask if I regret it, if I miss her. I don't. I miss who I thought she was. And that's not the same thing. There's a freedom in destruction if it's deliberate. A purity. She spent years slowly eroding the ground beneath us, and I spent months digging a sharper hole beneath her. Now we're even. Except I climbed out. And she didn't. You want a lesson? Fine. Here it is. Never mistake kindness for blindness. Never confuse silence with surrender. Some men fall apart when they're betrayed. Others take notes. I took notes. And when the time came, I wrote her out clean, without rage, without noise. Just a signature, a timestamp, and a door that no longer opens. That's not revenge. That's accounting. And the books are closed.